What do we know so far about the Russian-Ukrainian crisis? Well, according to Al Jazeera, dated February 25th, Russia had launched a full-scale military attack on the Ukraine that opened with air and missile attacks on Ukrainian military facilities before troops and tanks rolled across the borders from the northeast and south. The Ukrainian military has fought back on multiple fronts, and President Volodymyr Zelensky said in a video address early on Friday that 137 people, both servicemen and civilians, have been killed and hundreds more wounded. A senior U.S. defense official said Russia may be intent on seizing Kiev, the capital, and other key cities, and ultimately installing a more friendly government. Now, the problem with this conflict is going to come from the polarization of the political divide in the United States. And with that, you have the coalition partners to the United States and their media arms. And we all know that the media in the United States is completely untrustworthy. So how do we get pertinent information about this very pertinent crisis? And I would suggest to you to look outside the United States. Twitter is a very good outlet for media because it's up to date, it's automatic, it's quick. However, there's been a lot of disinformation about videos that are coming out showing Ukraine under attack. Meanwhile, these are videos that we shot like 2 years ago. We don't know where those rockets are coming from, whatnot. Not to say that there is an attack on the country, there is. So how severe is it? Well, if we're going to listen to the legacy media or the national media in the United States, it's going to be exaggerated. Now, we have the Democrats who are basically, or the establishment left, who are basically pushing for war against Russia. You have the Republicans who are against the conflict in Russia. But at the same time, those very same Republicans are for a conflict in China. And just earlier today, China had 9 warplanes in the airspace of Taiwan. Were they testing them? Who knows? Now, according to a Omicron report entitled Russia Willing to Negotiate Terms of Surrender with Ukraine, that Moscow was willing to negotiate terms of surrender with Kiev regarding the Russian military offensive currently underway in the Ukraine. And according to Kremlin press secretary Dmitry Peskov, Vladimir Putin had expressed his preparedness to engage in discussions with his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelensky, with a focus on obtaining a guarantee of neutral status and a promise of no weapons on its territory. These are the terms that, according to Peskov, would enable the achievement of demilitarization and denazification of the Ukraine and eliminate what Russia currently views as a threat to the security of the state and people. Now, while that's going on, you have the United States, of course, reacting in a way that could be seen as an instigator for war. Now, not many people know that economic sanctions are an act of war. And according to CNN, Joe Biden on Thursday unveiled new sanctions on top of the previous sanctions on Russia, which was meant to punish the country for its invasion. The new sanctions include export blocks on technology, a centerpiece on Biden's approach that he said would severely limit Russia's ability to advance its military and aerospace sector. And he also applied sanctions on Russian banks and corrupt billionaires and their families who are close to the Kremlin. Asked by CNN's Caitlin Collins, what could stop Putin if sanctions can't? Biden responded, I didn't say sanctions couldn't stop him. The threat of the sanctions, imposing the sanctions, and seeing the effect of the sanctions are two different things. But there is a global strike on the sanctions, and whether this is going to be immediate or whether Russia basically is going to retreat quicker than usual, we'll see. But we are hearing reports that Russia has abandoned some military vehicles in which the Ukrainian military have confiscated. And I don't think that they're going to take over the country. I think what they're going to do is try to suppress any military action from the Ukraine and try to suppress the neo-Nazi presence east of the country. Now, for those who are saying, well, what neo-Nazi presence? Well, there are separatists located throughout the east of the country. One of them is the Azov Battalion. Now, these neo-Nazis basically were trained by the CIA in 2015, just a couple of months after the fall of the democratically elected Ukrainian government, in which he was seen as a Russian asset by the people, and the people revolted, and the United States backed the revolt. And the CIA took advantage and basically armed and trained separatists in the Ukraine, including the Azov Battalion. This is a huge problem because these people are basically not like the neo-Nazi skinheads here in the United States. These are real SS-wearing racist organization that is basically a part of the Ukrainian National Guard. And they have legitimacy in defending the country. Why? Why are these people being trained by the CIA? Well, the CIA has a long history of training ultra-nationalist groups, going as far back as El Salvador to Afghanistan in 1980, 1979, 1980, and of course, in the Ukraine at the current time. So that's the Russians are basically trying to suppress these people in the independent territories in Odessa, in the east of the country. And while they're doing that, they're surrounded by NATO armies. So, I mean, I'm not trying to defend Russia here because Putin is a murderer. And I can't tell you how many journalists he's killed. I think it's well over 200 at this point, who have a dissenting view of Putin and the government. However, no one in this conflict is basically going to come out as a clean hands, whether it's the United States, Pakistan, who's acting as a mediator, France, who's trying to act as a mediator and have been for years with Russia, or even India at this point under Prime Minister Modi. What I think needs to happen is we need to have a mediator that would basically try to quell the situation, try to quell the conflict, because the United States isn't doing that. They're enacting sanctions. And that's not going to help the situation. I think what needs to happen is we need to get NATO off the stage, United States off the stage, and try to alleviate the problem using, say, China or Japan, or even a non-coalition partner. Somebody who isn't seen as an antagonist, because that's what Russia sees us in the coalition as. So it's not going to work. Now, earlier today, I saw a couple of interesting things from former US presidents. And, I got to say, some of the most hypocritical things I've seen in my time came on the eve of the conflict itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically share a screenshot I took out of Twitter, where George Bush basically said Russia's attack on Ukraine constitutes the gravest security crisis on the European continent since World War II. We cannot tolerate the authoritarian bully and danger that Putin poses. Former President Barack Obama basically said that the consequences of Russia's reckless actions extend beyond Ukraine's borders. This illegal invasion in the heart of Europe also threatens the foundation of the international order and security. Now, on top of that, you have US sanctions on Russia. You have two men who are basically war criminals opining that Russia is acting as a dictatorship or totalitarian mad country. Well, why didn't anybody hold the United States accountable for their invasion of Iraq on March 20th, 2003, in which 1.5 million people were killed on the basis of a lie? Where was the world stage and sanctions on the United States? Where was the outrage of the 2011 US military intervention in Libya, which was authorized by Obama, but was pressured by Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, along with Samantha Power and Susan Rice, which took place on March 19, 2011, in which we had killed Muammar Gaddafi. And now the country is a open-air slave market where radical fundamentalists such as the Islamic State and Jihad and the Libyan Arab Jamahiriya, which is basically the de facto group, and as well as a number of different radical fundamentalist groups who are fighting each other, trying to take control of whatever acreage of land that they can get. Or what about the September 22nd, 2014 US intervention in Syria, in which the Obama administration were bombing the Islamic State in the beginning. And while they were doing that, Obama used his presidential powers to use the CIA to conduct a covert operation named Timber Sycamore, in which they were arming and training ultra-Orthodox jihadist groups to overthrow the Bashar al-Assad government. Where was the outrage of the left? Where was the where was the sanctions on the US for conducting these illegal operations? Or what about the foreign involvement in the Yemeni civil war, in which the United States is guilty by supplying Saudi Arabia with millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in weaponry, in which that same weaponry went to bomb the Yemeni infrastructure, killing tens of thousands, many tens of thousands. Where was the outrage by the Republicans and Democrats? Where was the outrage by the global community? Where were the sanctions on the United States? A UN report on Yemen basically suggested that the United States and the United Kingdom are accomplices to atrocities. Assad Abu Khali, who argues that the UN Human Rights Council report on Yemen states that the United States is guilty of war crimes, wrote an article in the Real News Network where he is quoted as, quote, "The United States is an accomplice in Israeli war crimes and Saudi war crimes and all the crimes that occur in the region because the United States is the sponsor of almost all the despots of the region. Not Russia, not the Ukraine, not China, not Iran, the United States." And to top it all off, we don't have a single rational voice to basically come out on the world stage and author his leadership to mediate a truce between Ukraine and Russia. And like I said, we have an administration, a Biden administration, that doesn't want to talk with them, but they want to commit sanctions on them, like they did with Iran, like they did with Iraq, like they did in Afghanistan. And the many dozens of countries before them. And what they do is basically worsen the situation, because the people who hurt most from sanctions are not the government, are not the millionaires, but the common people. Most notably, the young and the elderly and the sick. That's who are hurt by sanctions. And so, with the United States unable to have a roundtable discussion, with the United Nations basically useless in terms of being an entity outside of the influence of the United States, we will need somebody in the Asian territories to mediate this conflict. Now, I don't know how far Russia is going to take it. I don't know when they're going to basically finally leave the country, if they ever do. But regarding the alleged disputed territories, they became independent territories just on September, I think, 22nd or 21st. And immediately thereafter, there was the invasion of the Russian military. Now, I want to show Luhansk and Donetsk are the areas that gained independence outside of the Ukraine. They were the disputed territories. Crimea. So these are the territories that also have the airports in which they bombed last night, Russia. Now, whether they go further west is going to be seen by the weekend, maybe as soon as tomorrow. But who knows how far west they go? And who knows whether there's going to be any type of real change, peacekeeping change. One thing I do know is that the people of the United States have been so inebriated with their political fanaticism that they are not seeing the world straight. They're seeing through a crooked lens. And with the disinformation that's being pumped out by our national media and from God knows who on the internet, it's a hard time finding reputable sources. Now, there have been some good reports. Aaron Mate is one. The Libertarian Institute, Scott Horton, Kyle Anzalone, Connor Freeman, Will Porter, Dave DeCamp, Liam McCollum, even the libertarian, like the young Reed Coverdale, who is actually doing a very good job of getting the limited factual information and posting it. And he's one of the very few people I saw basically apologize because he made a video the night prior saying that it doesn't seem Russia will invade Ukraine. Guess what? I was one of them. But he made an apology video, which he didn't have to do, but he did. That shows you that the guy basically has standards. But there are some good people reporting on it. And what we need is an unbiased view, an unprejudicial view. And reputable people are going to be few and far between, but they're out there. You just have to look for them. You're not going to be told the truth by Fox or CNN. you're only going to be misled. And we're going to need all the rational voices we could get, because if this conflict continues to stall out, the threat of a bigger war continues. And we already have US bases nearby, and President Biden is sending additional troops to the region. And so we need cooler heads to prevail, and we need more rational voices to give us the facts of the story. And so if there's any more news tomorrow, I will do another video where I will try to do my best to update you and keep you informed. Information is power, and information is key to understanding the world around us. Have a good night.